Ready? Good evening. The board meeting will come to order at 5 p.m. Thank you for attending the Albuquerque Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board on April 9th of 2026. Ms. Barada, can I get a member roll call vote, please? A member roll call. My apologies.
Xander Bouillonets.
Present.
Eduardo Budenaro.
Present.
Aaron Calderon.
Present.
Ricardo Reichfeld.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Barada. Next order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance. All rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next order of business will be the approval of the agenda. Do any board members have any proposed changes to the agenda for today as it currently is written? No. Perfect. With that, I make a motion that the agenda be approved as written. May I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, member. Bouillonets. Sorry. I get used to calling people a certain way. Ms. Barada, can I get a roll call vote?
Chair Calderon.
Approved.
Vice Chair Budenaro.
Approved.
Member Bouillonets.
Approved.
Member Richfeld.
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barada. I need to get back into the flow of things. It's rough.
God, it's like you haven't been a chair for a year.
I know, a year throws me off. The next order of business will be the review and approval of minutes. Do any board members have any proposed changes from the minutes from March 12th of 2026 as they're currently written?
No.
No.
With that, I make a motion that the minutes be approved as written. May I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Budenaro. Ms. Barada. Oh, Vice Chairman Budenaro. Thank you, sir. Ms. Barada, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon.
Approved.
Vice Chair Budenaro.
Approved.
Member Bouillonets.
Approved.
Member Richfeld.
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barada. The next order of business will be reports from city departments. First up will be from Albuquerque Police Department, the Internal Affairs Professional Standards Division, Major Camacho.
Good evening. So this month we have a couple of changes that have been made to the report. So I just kind of wanted to point those out to you, along with just the totals for the month. Currently, we're pending 93 cases in IAPS, with 39 of those being open this month. We've completed 24 this month. At the bottom, you'll see that we do have a new section that's titled the ESIs, which I had mentioned last month that we were trying to get those added. So open for March was 45 for the month, and year to date has been 129 of the enhanced supervisory interventions. So in case you didn't know what that was standing for. On the second page, we did expand it a little bit to include the area command and the IA professional standards sustained. The discipline recommended, right, for the allegations with sustained findings. So it should be noted that IAPS in general makes a recommendation to professional integrity, who then does the discipline process. So we try and stay within the matrix of sanctions, and that's kind of where, if you look on the right-hand side, it says discipline recommended. That's what we propose, is what's found in that matrix, and then that's what professional integrity goes off of. So there's 15 of those for the month. On the bottom section, you'll see that there are top SOPs that by count of completed investigations of what it is that we had sustained findings for and for the completed investigation. So on the left-hand side, you'll see there's a file count. So for example, the 1.1 personnel code of conduct, there's a file count of 12. That means that there were 12 cases that had a total allegation count. That is the number of SOPs. So does that make sense? If we have a case, there could be a number of violations that are found within that case. That's why the number is higher. And then on the right-hand side is the investigation with sustained allegations. Again, utilizing the file count and the allegation count so that you have a better understanding of how many cases we're looking at and what is included in those cases as far as the allegations. So, do you guys have any questions in reference to the new report?
You answered mine, because I was wondering the difference between your total count and then the allegation count. And so
Oh.
I was initially, I think, but I was like, thank you for answering that.
Yes.
Any other questions from the board?
Okay, thank you
Thank
so
you, Major
much. Have a
Camacho.
great
I
evening.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Next on the list will be Internal Affairs Force Division, Commander Norris.
Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing well, sir. How are you?
Good, thank you. Use of force events for the month of March 26. Some things have kind of remained the same, but there have been some interesting changes with regard to just the amount of uses of force that we've had, uses of force that relate to in relation to how many contacts we've had, or uses of force relative to the arrests that we made. But Southeast and Valley still remain our highest area commands as it relates to numbers of uses of force. And we had 7 uses of force in the Valley Area Command and the Southeast Area Command, and 5 uses of force in the Southwest Area Command. The other area commands were very, very, very small numbers. Those are actually relatively small numbers compared to what we've seen in the past, which kind of segues me into showing you or just kind of bringing to your attention that the last 3 months we've had a decrease in uses of force. So for the month of January, we had 35. For the month of February, we had 32. And for the month of March, we've had 27. So we are on a decrease. I will tell you that just if kind of the trends hold true like they have in years past, there's a likelihood that we will see an increase in the summer months. Our numbers of contacts go up. It's just summer. There's a big misconception that that we're very busy during the holidays. We are 10 times busier during the summer, actually. It's good to see those numbers decreasing the past 3 months, but we are anticipating, just based off of years past, an increase when it comes to the summer months. As far as force rate per 1,000 calls for service, the numbers were a little different. So like I said, we had the Southeast, we had the Valley that had the highest numbers of uses of force, both at 7, and then for the third was Southwest. But as far as force rate per 1,000 calls for service, actually University Area Command was the highest in that, and it was 1.2 uses of force per 1,000 calls for service, and then second would have been just the Southeast Area Command at 1.1 uses of force per 1,000 calls for service. Little different this month as well for force rate per 100 custodial arrests. For the Southwest, well, actually, University Area was the highest in that at 4.2 arrests. 4.2 uses of force per 100 custodial arrests. And then we had 4 uses of force per 100 custodial arrests out of area, which tells me that probably has something to do with tactical activations, either us assisting, which we sometimes do, whether it be Rio Rancho or BCSO. Those obviously don't fall within our jurisdiction, or maybe surveillance operations with some of our investigative teams that have taken us outside of the jurisdiction. The next one would have been 2.9 uses of force per 100 custodial arrests, and that would have been the Southwest. As far as the age range with the individuals that we find ourselves in the most use of force encounters, that has not changed. It's still the between 30 and 39 age group, but we had 12 uses of force with individuals of that age range. Behavioral health involved, we could confirm that 17% of our uses of force had some sort of behavioral health element to it, with 24% unknown. We could not confirm what the issue was going on there. As far as alcohol or drugs involved, 59% of our uses of force involved somebody who was under the influence of some sort of alcohol or some sort of drug. Excuse me, guys, sorry. As far as calls for service, where we were finding ourselves in the most use of force events, same suspicious persons or vehicles. There were 6 uses of force with suspicious persons or vehicle calls or that type of on-site activity. 4 uses of force with family disputes and 4 uses of force with disturbance calls. Little different this month. We still have our empty hand techniques that probably have our highest number. That's the tactic that we've used most often when using force. But our less lethal, they were very, very close numbers this month, where I'll give you an example. Empty hand takedown, we had 11 empty hand takedowns last month for the month of March. Empty hand controls were 8. But if you go down to the less lethal, where we're using intermediate weapons, we had 10 ECW deployments, which is obviously just one off of the empty hand takedowns, and 7 40 millimeter launcher deployments. So that is a little different than in months past. Our shows of force are down. They went down from in February they were at 22, and in March we were at 10 uses or shows of force. So those went down. Just kind of speaks to the low number of uses of force. We had 1 total completed investigation for a level 1. That doesn't mean we don't have active investigations going on for level 1 uses of force, but we had 1 completed last month and 39 completed level 2 and 3 uses of force. So those numbers are still very low. And we had a total of just 1 out of policy use of force out of all the uses of force that we had last month. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Commander. Any questions from the board members? No questions.
No? Okay.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next on the agenda will be Albuquerque Community Services, Albuquerque Community Safety by Deputy Director Bustamante.
Good evening. Good to be up here again. Sorry I missed, I think it was last month, but we're really excited. We all start there probably. Continue with our Seasons of Nonviolence and all of our programming. Put a pin in it at our facility there at 1210 San Mateo. We will have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 80s, 90s ones, so just the best ones for sure. We'll have pizza, a lot of snacks for our Seasons of Nonviolence, and trying to mobilize the community in that area in the International District to come out, but it of course is open to everybody. Field continues to forge ahead. We're really excited about some of the work that we've done. We just wrapped winter transportation. Last year we had about 4,500 transports through that program. This year, despite the milder winter, we had over 6,000 transportations. And it usually prompts the question, like, how many duplicates do you have in there? We did have some folks who got, 20, 30 transports with us, but we had a lot of unique individuals in there. So really excited to be able to do that. And despite the milder weather, that folks were still, we were able to get them motivated and get them into services. Overall, sent over the monthly report, but it is about 3,000 calls a month still right now. We are anticipating field to pick up, and of course in the summer, really see those calls increase. We start to see more in the 4,000. If you remember last July, we got just north of about 4,600 calls. So just planning and doing everything from shift bid and everything else to prepare for that. Our Violence Intervention Division is also hard at work. We are just continuing a lot of that work. We have some grants wrapping up that we're also, looking at long-term and continuity and the rest. To support the work, including our school-based violence intervention program that now has really, I'll get a report over, but we are getting just constant referrals across all of our programs, along with our youth violence intervention program. We actually have a success story that we'll be hoping to put out that is with a middle school age kid who's doing much better now. So really excited about that. Outside of that, of course, it's budget season. I know you guys are living it, we're living it, and just work through everything right now. A lot of late nights, spend a lot of time in these chambers. Looking forward to it though. Obviously the city is in a really important moment, and we want to make sure that we're showing up both for the community and for the city and just working through all of this. So looking forward to those days. Outside of that, I'll kind of end where I started with a lot of our outreach in the Seasons of Nonviolence. Outreach, I think our council goal this year was about 250 or 300 events attended. As of the end of March, we were right at about 470. So we will get past that, and most of our goals either meeting or exceeding. And then really with the Seasons of Nonviolence campaign, we will have a kickoff in May for the Summer of Nonviolence. We're still doing the summer as our marquee kind of stretch of it, where we have the drive-ins at Balloon Fiesta Park. We're working with the Topes on what a baseball camp would look like, even if it's not at Topes Field, and a few other things to help just offer fun for kids, another pool party, and the rest. So just stay tuned. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the board? No questions, sir? I appreciate your
Thank
time.
you so much.
Next item on the agenda will be the city attorney, Ms. Lindsay Roseborough.
Good evening, board. I apologize because last time we were here, I said I would send the quarterly litigation reports, and I did fail to do that. But I will get that to you before the next meeting, and hopefully before the end of next week. A couple things to note when you are reviewing those. You'll see a case name and the department client, the ones that say police or the ones that are involving APD, obviously. And then it also includes city victories in the litigation reports as well, cases that were dismissed upon either city motion or trial. There might be a couple of notes that the board may be interested in. One is in the document titled EC-2664. There's a claim of excessive force that was settled for $2.5 million. So that is one of note. So I will send those along to the executive director so those can be passed along to the board to review, and if there are any questions after review, let me know. Thank you. Nothing further for me.
Thank you, appreciate it. Any questions from the board? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda will be from City Council from Mr. Chris Sullivan.
Good evening, Chair, Honorable Board. Chris Sullivan, Albuquerque City Council. Brief update. As ACS said, it is budget season, so we're getting prepared for that. Lots of late nights and looking forward to 3 or 4 meetings that are going to run really long. Also, we have the potential board member attending their first meeting. The legislation to get this board member appointed will be April 20th, so looking forward to that, and everything's smooth sailing so far. And what we're trying to do now is build the bench so we do not have a backlog, not backlog, that's not the word I want to use, a deficit where we're taking so long to get through folks. So the agency and the contract compliance officer and council service, we interviewed one more person, and she successfully did well. So we're going to keep her in line and keep her in line should somebody have to turn off. And that's all I have.
Perfect, thank you, sir. Any questions from the board? Perfect, thank you, sir. Next item on the agenda will be Community Policing Council, CPC, Mr. Kelly Mensa.
Good evening, Chair Calderon, Honorable Board, employees, officers, everyone else, everyone watching at home. We've had a pretty good month, I think, and we've been working on some good events here. For the next group of meetings in April and early May, we're going to be having the warden, Kai Smith, attend the meetings from MDC, and also we'll have some other things as well, some discussion on that. We are going into some new recommendations which deal with a lot of things. For instance, we came up with 8 this month that we're supposed to put in. We've never done really more than 2 in a month before, so that was a pretty good standard. We started off with recommendation 26-2, which is on public education of the law enforcement process. One of the issues we run into speaking to people is that they just don't know how things work out. Everyone says, APD doesn't lock up enough people, and obviously that's not APD's responsibility. People just don't know where the court system, the internment system, and the police and everyone else fits in. So one of the recommendations is to get an education program going for the public of Albuquerque. Recommendation 26-3 deals with additional training for law enforcement operators. We've spoken in a few meetings about people with weapons walking around the city, displaying weapons, and not as far as having a good gun on your hip, but walking around with a hatchet or something like that. And these things have happened. So we have a recommendation that we might be putting in on having further training for the emergency operators as to how to source that call. It is a First Amendment right, obviously, to walk around with whatever you want for the most part, but that's something that we've had discussion on. 26-4 would be new recruiting options. This one I came up with in my own head. How do we get more officers? This is one of our city council laden duties to get more, help LAPD get more officers. And I think I have two pretty good ideas. We're working on exactly how that's going to work out. So we're going to turn that one in. 26-5, someone wanted more statistics on ATL Bolo, which is at large, be on the lookout statistics, because he feels that if we keep better statistics on these calls, we will have less repeat offenders on the freeways and on the streets who are just doing illegal things. So we're going to look into that. 26-6 is instituting an emergency communications policy to demonstrate personal concern. We've had a couple of people complain about calling APD and just probably not getting exactly what they wanted to say in. And we realize how difficult it is to work in the call center, especially with the long hours and the shortages. But they felt as though maybe the person could have spent a little more time with them trying to get exactly what they were saying. So we're going to speak to the emergency communications director about this as to exactly how this process works. 26-7, making warrant checks on all domestic violence calls mandatory. We understand that this generally happens anyway, and this is a good way to separate the two parties in a domestic violence call. If one person's got a warrant, you take them to jail overnight or whatever, and that gets them apart. But we want to make it a mandatory SOP change. 26-8, eliminating jurisdictional ECC transfers. This may or may not be possible. We're still in the investigation stage. We had a council member call 911 from Paseo and I-25 going west, and he was transferred 3 times. First to Rio Rancho ECC. What is it up there? What's that? As you go across the freeway, Los Ranchos, and then to Bernalillo County. So we're looking to make that the first time you call, the person just takes the information and forwards it. We don't know if that's legal or not yet. We're looking into it. And finally, 26-9, we want to improve the APD website. We go through it. There are some errors. There are some things that don't make a lot of sense, some inefficiencies. We want to put together a committee that's going to help go over every word of the APD website, make it more user-friendly, and just institute changes that are going to help the city. So a couple of these call for SOP change. We'll be sending them to the CPOA board. A couple of them are just strict policy changes that are not going to be official, so we'll take care of those. And we are looking to make some sort of state outreach with the city through Xochitl Campos Biggs and a couple of other people as to what the city is working on, what the council might want to help on. So we're going to get some kind of subcommittee going to help get the legislative concerns addressed, make a letter writing campaign or whatever is going to happen. We're looking on that for the summer. And we met with the city a few times on that one. We are almost have all the annual reports up on the website, and I've got a couple of events to attend. We got Metro Public Safety Day next week. We got the biannual block captains meeting, Nob Hill Downtown Echo. I'm going to be a guest on next week with Daryl Deloche, and also Language Access Month of Action, which is going to invite the public. So we'll be tabling those events, and that's all I have at this point. I stand for questions.
Thank you, sir. Board, do you have any questions? No questions, sir. Thank you for the update.
All right.
They're pretty extensive. I'm probably going to request down the road we get a written brief as well.
One more time?
Eventually, for the next month, I'm going to ask you that we get a written brief.
Okay.
Because you have a lot of information, and I'm
Right.
like running out of space on my stuff, so I'm like,
Okay.
I want this written.
We'll do
So
it.
we'll work on that later.
Okay.
But appreciate you.
Excellent.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
With that being said, the next item will be the mayor's office. No one from the mayor's office is present, correct? Fabulous. Moving on to the next item, which would be Civilian Police Oversight Agency, Executive Director McDermott.
Thank you, Chair Calderon. So the agency received 84 complaint intakes from March 1st, 2026 through March 31st of 2026. 19 of those were assigned for investigation between the CPOA and ones appropriately already with IA. 23 were driving complaints that were resolved with the supervisors. 29 were miscellaneous, where either the insufficient information was provided, it was determined that APD personnel were not involved, or the complaint was resolved to the citizen's satisfaction due to them seeking information or other recourses. 13 were submitted to some form of mediation, and we received 2 commendations. So of special note that the fact that the higher number came in, but the complaints themselves assigned were a little lower, it's because we've been doing a really, I guess you'd say, stringent intake and working with citizens to get at what they want, because they think filing a complaint is what they want, but that's maybe not actually what they want. So we've been working with them more, and so it's just helping the overall volume for the investigators to be manageable. So just a special note there. Our lead investigator is primarily responsible for that and has been doing a very good job with that. We have conducted interviews for the admin assistant position, and we'll be finalizing that candidate soon. We also have received and reviewed applications for the last 2 vacant investigator positions within the agency, and we'll be conducting those interviews within the next couple of weeks. As you've already heard, it is budget time. The CPOA is not asking for anything really additional at this time. It is important for us to fulfill all our positions first and then kind of reevaluate, reassess, and then determine if there's any kind of a need beyond that. But at the moment, we are maintaining, hopefully maintaining, per the council, of not taking any cuts from us, hopefully. So we have the necessary lobby construction was finally completed for our agency, and that is in order to better serve the community and provide for the safety and health of our employees. So we have always been accepting walk-in complaints, even when we were not having the lobby and not having construction, or had no construction yet. But now we are officially able to have everybody come, and we took for those that may have looked at our website, we had sort of a caution of, we're not really accepting much, even though we were. But now we've removed that notice so that people can come if they need to file the complaint with us in person. It's already been mentioned, but we did want to welcome member Ricardo Rexfeld to the CPOA board. We're looking very forward to working collaboratively with him. And again, as already has been mentioned, a potential board member, Georgia Duncan, is observing the meeting. The board, this is just something that the board may see a specific amendment to the oversight ordinance in the council's agenda soon. If you've paid attention to the letter of introduction, you may have noticed this. The purpose of this amendment is specific and limited to clarifying the categories of APD personnel that CPOA investigates. This does stem from a interpretational difference of the ordinance between APD and the CPOA. We have held several meetings with city councilors and APD personnel. There is an upcoming meeting between CPOA and APD to discuss further some of these issues. And if this amendment moves forward, the additional revisions and clarifications to the oversight ordinance will be forthcoming at a later time, proposed by the agency and the board to propose to council. So we've mentioned this to the councilors. They are fine with addressing further concerns later down the road. So just in case you were concerned that you didn't have a chance to discuss it, that amendment is only very limited. So as we always do, we presented an educational class to the cadets of class 134 on 3/31/26. They graduated on 4/6/26. This is basically to give them some familiarity with the agency, what the agency does, what the board does, and what their responsibilities are when they receive complaints, if they receive complaints from citizens. So we do this as a normal, but we just did it, so I thought I'd mention it here. And as a final note, the board has requested training on the forensics unit. So the date has been set for April 29th at 4 p.m. You'll get in your emails the more specifics about location and all of that. Please provide any specific questions or any topics that you would like to me in email, hopefully by next week, so that I can go ahead and send it to the team. They're, obviously interested in tailoring the presentation to what you're most wanting to know and what you want to learn about. So just let me know that. That is all I have for the report. If there's any questions. Okay, so I will move on to the 2 non-concurrences that we received. So the first is CPC 50-25, and this is a non-concurrence regarding the shift in an SOP. So the SOP selected by the CPOA was 116A1C, which is all department personnel, whether on or off duty, shall act in a manner that is above reproach. This includes avoiding behavior that impairs the department's efficient and effective operation. So just a brief thing of the facts is that it was brought to an officer's attention that an individual significantly damaged a fence connected to a call for service that the officers were currently on. The officer determined that they would leave it and that the property owner could call if they wanted to report the damage. It was the CPOA's determination that the failure to address the property damage issue brought discredit to the department by showing a disregard for the community member and a possible victim. And it also impaired the efficiency of the department by forcing other personnel to respond to a call for service. So the department based its non-concurrence on their belief that the CPOA speculated it impaired efficiency because it was not established if, in fact, another call for service had come in. It is my opinion that establishing a second call for service was not necessary to demonstrate an impairment of effective operations. But the department instead sustained it for 11584, so the same issue, but switched it to a different SOP. That essentially requires officers to obtain information in a professional and courteous manner and act upon it. Now, we did not contemplate this particular SOP because typically we use that SOP when there is some element in the complaint about a conduct issue and a job performance are kind of both tied. In this specific complaint, there was an allegation against the officer for conduct, but the evidence showed that that was not true. So it was our belief that it would send a mixed message to the employee of receiving an unfounded for one conduct SOP and then receive a sustained for a different SOP that also addresses a conduct issue. So again, that's why we selected the SOP that we selected. The SOP change then as a result, the one that we had originally selected had a higher severity level than the one that the department chose. So the presumptive of that particular SOP was an 8-hour in that case. The presumptive of the SOP that the department went with is a written reprimand. So as a result, that discipline changed, and then after the process that goes through the professional standards, it was essentially lowered to a verbal reprimand, which was the minimum of that category. So it was a combination of an SOP change and a discipline issue. So, if there's any questions, I'll move on.
Questions? No, no questions.
All right. The next one is CPC 21125. And so there are 2 different employees and issues listed in this non-concurrence memo. So the first is for the sergeant. SOP 2165A1 was found by the CPOA to be sustained, but the department changed it to an unfounded. So the SOP is a department supervisor shall review reports for grammar and elements of a crime and ensure that the narrative supports each event card and listed charges when applicable. So the sergeant's responsibility was to review the report and determine if charges were appropriately established. The sergeant, as learned throughout the course of the investigation, did not know if the officer tried to contact the suspect for his version of events, as the report did not say so. Per the SOP, an attempt at contact is supposed to be made or documented as to why it could not be made. The suspect's information was in the report, and as a proving sergeant, that was not checked or addressed. Per the report, the officer did not collect video footage of the incident. The officer did not observe the video to aid in their decision, and this was not questioned by the supervisor. The officer did not establish any proof of the alleged spitting, which was not questioned by the supervisor. Since these elements were missing from the report, it was CPOA's assertion that the supervisor did not confirm the narrative supported and provided the elements necessary with the summons. That was our basis on this. It was the department's assertion that the victim's statement was sufficient. So that's why they unfounded it. The second issue was that the department upheld the sustain, that the officer did not do the items as described above. So all those different investigative elements that we just mentioned. But the department changed the discipline recommendation from a letter of reprimand to the enhanced supervisory intervention, which is, again, based on a special order. It's not in the chart, so it's technically outside of the chart, but will be incorporated in the next revision of 3-46. So, and that's all I have.
Thank you.
Questions?
Any questions from the board?
So I just want to make sure I understand. There was two in that last one. Was one the sergeant didn't validate the narrative, but that was sustained, even though, or
So two different issues at
Right.
hand.
Yeah,
So the officer should have done a bunch of different things and documented them. And so
Agreed.
the sustain was for that officer, and the department upheld that sustain. Our assertion in the course of this investigation was that the sergeant should have caught some of those different things and asked the officer or had them clarified, because a lot of those elements were, in our assessment of the case, necessary to have established the charges. But that wasn't done by the sergeant, so we believed that a sustain was appropriate for the sergeant, not basically doing his diligence to review the report and catch those various issues. But the department believed that there was sufficient probable cause based on the victim's statement alone. So we have a difference of opinion on that as to whether or not the charges were sufficiently established. Department believes that the victim's statement was sufficient. Based on all those absences and things, CPO disagrees. So.
okay, then, excuse me, I heard that correctly then. And the only thing I want to comment on that is I think that it could set a dangerous trend if we don't encourage quality QA from the sergeants to review documentation, right? Because that's one of their core responsibilities, is to review documentation from their officers. And if they're missing key things, to me, is that they're doing to not reading efficiently? Are they not understanding? Like, now I'm asking questions as to why that wasn't caught, right? It all ended up the same, but I'm now worried about this particular officer, this particular sergeant. What else is he missing? Does that make sense?
It does, and I think that's the sustained finding from the CPOA.
Right, we
Possible.
sustained,
Right.
the department felt not, obviously the non-concurrences as they stand in terms of ordinance, the main is mostly informational and to drive policy. If the board felt that there was something, probably in 216, where we quoted, if there needs to be some further enhancement that the board would like to recommend or discuss, that would probably be the most appropriate process for this, is if there's, the board look at 216, see if there needs to be something more laid out in that part that we cited that, makes it clear either way. So.
I'll take that as an action item to try to bring that to the Policies and Procedures Board, to bring up 216 Policies and Procedure Chair, Vice Chair Budinaro. Because that's something that, that's just something, right, those types of issues we need to make sure we nip in the bud, because if we don't, what else are they going to miss? And we need to make sure documentation, right? I apologize, it's CYA. So, okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
That's all I have.
Cool. Perfect. With that being said, the next order of business will be public comment. Ms. Barela, is there any written comment?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
There is not, sorry. I did not say that correctly. Perfect. So with that being said, we'll move on to the next order of business, which will be the serious use of force cases. We'll probably get to the entire board meeting before we take a lunch, based on where we're at. So, or dinner break, excuse me. I do get the nice ones. So first case to be discussed today will be APD case number 25-0034031 by member Bolianitz.
Thank you, Chair Calderon. This use of force was on April 28th, 2025 at approximately 12:22 a.m. Officer 1 contacted Mr. S in a public park near 601 Edith after park hours. Officer 1 advised Mr. S he was trespassing and attempted to obtain his identifying information. Mr. S was uncooperative and repeatedly stood up after being told to remain seated, refused to provide information, and attempted to leave. Officer 1 informed Mr. S he was detained and attempted to place him in handcuffs. Mr. S pulled away from Officer 1 and struck the officer with a backpack and was observed holding a knife. Officer 1 deployed his ECW multiple times. Several cartridges were deployed and also re-energized cycles while giving repeated commands Mr. S to get on the ground and drop the knife. Officer 1 also used physical force, including grabbing, pushing, and taking Mr. S to the ground, and 2 close fist strikes during the struggle. Mr. S continued to resist until Officer 2 arrived on the scene. Officer 1 and Officer 2 worked together to gain control with Mr. S and putting him face down. The individual's behavior after he was taken into custody, after being detained, Mr. S was searched and placed in a patrol unit. He was provided rescue and transportation to the hospital where he was treated and released, and then he was booked to PTC for the charges. Medical provided was provided. Officers sustained no injuries. Mr. S sustained minor abrasions to his left elbow and a probe puncture to the chest area. This individual was charged with criminal trespassing, concealing identity, resisting, evading, and obstructing an officer, battery on a peace officer, and also had a misdemeanor warrant. No other use of forces were on file for this individual. It was identified to be reasonable, minimal, and necessary. The one thing I do want to call out specifically, there was a policy violation of standard operating procedures, which I believe Commander Norris will speak to. And that's it for my recap.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Overview from CPOA, Executive Deputy Director. Oh, awesome. Okay.
Yes, good evening, Chair, members of the board. This incident involved a use of force encounter that, as Member Bullian stated, occurred around midnight when an officer contacted an individual who was seated near the boundary of a public park. At the time of the encounter, the officer believed the individual was on a city property and potentially trespassing. The officer initiated contact and requested the individual's name and identification. When the subject declined to provide the identification and stated that he wished to leave, the officer informed him that he was being detained for trespassing and he would go in handcuffs. The officer notified ECC to create a call for service when the subject was about to flee, and that was approximately 40 seconds after the initial encounter, which could be considered an officer safety issue and was addressed during the investigation. Standard procedure require officer to contact ECC to create a call for service before they make the approach. The individual in this case, he attempted to flee the area and did not comply with the officer's commands. The situation escalated quickly and resulted in multiple applications of force, including several deployments of ECWs, an empty hand technique such as control, strikes, and takedown. During the course of the encounter, the presence of knife was noted as a factor considered in officer's decision-making. A review of the objective OBRD evidence indicated that officer did not give any warning to the individual to drop the knife, or he would be tased. Though the subject immediately started running away and the situation was very fluid, and the presence of the knife in the subject hand could not be determined based on the evidence that we saw, OBRD footage. The knife wasn't clearly visible on the OBRD until after several ECW cycles were deployed by the officer. The IAFD evaluated the incident under the totality of the circumstances and determined that officers' actions were within policy, while the investigation concluded that a lawful objective existed for the initial detention based on the officer's good faith belief that the subject was trespassing and the presence of the posted signage, the repeated ECW applications during the encounter, particularly in this context of a subject attempting to flee for a relatively minor underlying offense, raise consideration regarding the proportionality and the application of force. The subject, along with several other charges, was also charged with criminal trespass. However, it was later determined during the course of the IAFT investigation that the officer did not do enough investigation to establish that charge. During the investigation, there were several potential issues, misconduct issues that were identified. Some were addressed through email communications with the involved officer chain of command, and some through internal affair request for investigation. The all force applications were deemed within policy by the IFT.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Commander Norris, do you have anything to add to that?
Nothing to add to that. You had a question about the misconduct?
Yeah, if you could just run this through that policy violation.
I can't at this point.
Okay.
Reason being, and I'll just kind of say this for future meetings, it would be extremely helpful for me when you review these. Email me the questions you guys have, that way I can answer them. That would be really helpful to me because I don't want to come up here and not have answers for you guys. It's hard for me to review these cases on top of the other cases that I have to review and try to pick out what questions I think you may ask. So it's difficult. I will tell you that in this case in particular, we did have a question of lawful objective, and that was part of the misconduct investigation. But I will tell you that just kind of the fact that we found the policy, we found the use of force in policy, will tell you that we found that there was a lawful objective. If there's no lawful objective and you use force, 100% of the time, the force is going to be out of policy.
Got it. Okay.
Because you're essentially using you have no reason to be there. You're using force on somebody, right? And citizens can resist an unlawful arrest. It was a question as to what the lawful objective was related to criminal trespass. And what we had to do is issue a target letter so we could ask those questions because it was potential misconduct. But the fact that we did find the policy in, the force in policy, we found that there was a lawful objective based off of the facts and circumstances that we uncovered through a preponderance of evidence. Yes, sir. Any questions?
Any questions for the Commander or Deputy Director? Thank you, sir.
Okay, great.
Okay, give me 1 second. Are there any further discussion or additional questions that you would like to bring up before we move on?
Chair.
Deputy Director.
Yes, I have an answer for Member Buliana's question. Yes, Commander Norris stated the issue was about the lawful objective, and the other issue that was looked at whether the officer had enough reasonable suspicion to charge the individual for criminal trespass.
Okay.
So those were the two issues that were
Got it.
looked
And then
at in the misconduct investigation.
Yeah, and then for Commander Norris responding to that of saying because the use of force wasn't policy, then that was then found valid for criminal trespassing. So that makes sense. I just saw that and I just wanted that clarification. So I appreciate it, both of you guys.
Perfect, thank you. So with that, do the board members agree with the findings from the Internal Affairs Force Division investigation?
Yes.
Cool. Yes, perfect. With that, I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the findings of APD's Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case number 25-0034-031. May I get a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Parada, you get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon,
Affirm.
Vice Chair Budenaro,
Affirm.
Member Bullionitz,
Affirmed.
Member Richfield.
Affirm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Parada. With that being said, we'll move on to the next case, which will be APD case number 25-004-5599, presented by myself. Date of this case was on June 4th of 2025. The use of forces that were used were level 3 on Officer 1, empty hand control and handcuffs with injury. Level 2 from Officer 1, empty hand takedown with injury. Officer 1, empty hand control with injury. Officer number 2, empty hand control with injury. Level 1 use of forces were Officer 1, empty hand control times 2. Officer 1, empty hand control with pain compliance. And then Officer 1 with empty hand takedown. Summary of the events. On June 4th of 2025, at approximately 1700 hours, officers responded to reported commercial robbery at the Valero gas station located on Manal Boulevard. The store manager reported that a male subject or suspect had entered the business and displayed a firearm and stole items before fleeing. 911 reported that the suspect was described as a Hispanic male in his 30s, approximately 5'8", 140 pounds, wearing black and yellow raincoat and dark jeans. As officers arrived in the area, they observed an individual matching the suspect's description, later identified as Mr. H. Running southbound on Moody Park Drive, Officer 1 exited his marked patrol vehicle with his firearm drawn and pursued Mr. H while issuing verbal commands to stop. During the pursuit, Officer 1 closed distance and pushed Mr. H from behind on his upper back with two hands, causing him to fall onto the gravel surface while holding onto his department-issued firearm. Excuse me. Upon falling and landing on his side, Mr. H dropped a firearm he was holding and rolled onto his back. Officer 1 secured the weapon and holstered his own firearm. Officer number 2 arrived to assist with the arrest. Mr. H resisted by keeping his arms underneath his body, yelling profanities at officers, and subsequently biting officer number 2 on the leg. Officers used physical force to pull Mr. H's arms free and place him in handcuffs. While being escorted to the patrol vehicle, Mr. H continued to resist by twisting his body, yelling, and making threats. Officer 1 applied control techniques using handcuffs, lifting and applying downward pressure to maintain compliance while walking him forward. As resistance continued, Officer 1 applied additional control by pushing down on Mr. H's forearm and lifting his upper body. During the process, Mr. H fell forward and struck his face on the hood of the patrol vehicle. Officer number 1 maintained control by securing Mr. H's hands and against the hood using his arm and leg positioning techniques. When officers attempted to place Mr. H into the patrol vehicle, he refused to sit. Officer 1 used his open palm to push Mr. H into the seated position inside the unit. Based on totality of circumstances, Mr. H's active resistance and behavior toward officers, these uses of forces were reviewed and found compliant and within policy. All uses of force during the incident were investigated by Internal Affairs and determined to be reasonable, minimal, and necessary. Mr. H's behavior after he was taken into custody continued to resist and be disruptive after being taken into custody. Medical attention was provided once he was secured in the vehicle. Injuries sustained by officers or individuals. Officer number 3 had a bruising to left knee. Officer number 2 was bitten on the left thigh by Mr. H. Mr. H had abrasions to his left knee, scraped skin around his ankle cuffs, some swelling to both hands, and an abrasion inside his lower lip. Individual was charged with robbery with a deadly weapon, resisting, evading, obstructing an officer, battery on a peace officer ×2, criminal damage to property under $1,000, and assault on a peace officer. Mr. H had one more use of force on file, which was a use of force to 2014-000075. Any policy discrepancies discovered? Yes, there was one for SOP 1-1-5-A-5 for the code of conduct, which states any personnel represents departments or identify themselves as police officer or department employees. They shall not use profanity, directed insult, or any language that is derogatory, contemptuous, or disrespectful towards any person. Another one was for tactics. An officer performing an empty hand takedown while having his department-issued firearm in his hand and not secure or not holstered. The officer also picked up the subject's firearm off the ground and held it in his hand as he assisted in pulling the subject's right arm behind his back. As he held the firearm in his hand, he pointed it directly at himself while struggling to move the arm behind the subject's back. An MTR was generated for that one. Training, the officers applied the PRS against department training, MTR generated for that one as well. There was no deficiencies for equipment or supervision. That was a long one. With that being said, Deputy Director Bassi, for your overview, sir.
Thank you, Chair. This case involved the application of empty hand techniques, including control and takedown during a response to a reported commercial burglary at a gas station. According to the initial call, the individual displayed a firearm and left the store without paying for the merchandise. Responding officers located an individual who matched the description from the call in the vicinity, seated at a bus stop. When officers activated emergency equipment to initiate contact, the individual fled on foot. An officer pursued and pushed the individual, leading to a takedown, at which time an object that was consistent in appearance with a firearm was observed nearby the subject in this case. Additional officers, they arrived on scene and encountered resistance while attempting to place the individual in handcuffs. After a period of struggle, the individual was secured as officers escorted him to a patrol car. While one officer was holding on to the cheek plates of the handcuffs, the individual was heard yelling toward the officer to stop, and that officer responded by saying no. It was observed that the individual appeared to spit toward the officer. In response, that officer used an empty hand control technique, applying pressure to the handcuffs and guiding the individual onto the hood of the patrol car while pushing the handcuffs upwards. During the interaction, the individual complained of pain and continued to resist, including he was actively kicking the officers. The application of pressure on the wrist resulted in visible injury to the subject, though the IAFD classified it as a level 1 use of force. During the FRB review, questions were raised regarding whether the application of the pressure to the handcuffs could be perceived as punitive rather than a control measure. It was noted that this consideration was evaluated and that the force was determined to be intended as a control technique designed to gain compliance through temporary discomfort. The investigation did not explain how that determination was made. Additional discussions at the FRB focused on medical care. The individual remained on scene for an extended period of time prior to being transported to the hospital by the officers. When EMS arrived, the individual reportedly complained of pain and expressed a desire to be transported. The available documentation did not articulate the reason for not allowing transport by EMS, nor did it explain why officer decided to transport him to the hospital after approximately 3 hours. It was unclear what had changed from the initial call for transport till after 3 hours. There were other potential concerns, as Member Calderon already noted, that pertained the firearm handling and safety, the use of derogatory language by one of the officer, and the application of the passive restraint system not in aligned with the training. All those issues were handled appropriately by the department. The IAFD determined that the use of force application met the policy standards of being reasonable, minimal, and necessary in this particular incident.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Commander Norris, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add at this
Perfect.
point.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any questions for Deputy Director or Commander Norris?
Yes.
No question. Thank you. Appreciate it. With that being said, do we agree with the findings from the Internal Affairs Force Division investigation?
Yes.
Okay. So I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the findings of APD's Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case number 25-0045599. May I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Parala, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon,
Affirm.
Vice Chair Budenaro,
Affirm.
Member Bolianitz,
Affirm.
Member Richfield.
Affirm.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Parala. I appreciate that. With that being said, we'll move on to the next order of business, which will be officer-involved shooting cases. We have one case today, and that will be presented by Member Budenaro for APD case number 25-0054704.
Thank you, Chair. This incident began July 4th, 2025. The location is 2119 South Branch Drive in the southwest. The involved individual was Mr. B. Mr. B called 911 approximately at 12:19, reporting an argument with his brother who had a gun the day prior, he stated. He advised that his parents were home but under the influence of narcotics. Mr. B did not answer any of the operator's questions and did not disclose any diagnosis of himself. His mother had later disclosed that he had a developmental disability and ADHD. Officer 1 and 2 arrived at 12:34 p.m. At 12:36, they were advised, or they were thought to have been advised, that Mr. B had a prior history of aggravated battery on a peace officer with a deadly weapon, and battery and assault on a peace officer, and resisting or evading an officer. Officers had already exited the vehicles and did not receive the information before contact was made. Officers observed the exterior security door closed and the interior door fully open. Due to sunlight conditions, Officer 1 could only see a shadowy figure approaching. Officer 1 announced police department, then Albuquerque police. Within seconds, Mr. B exited from the security door, pointing a black gun in the direction of Officer 1. Officer 1 drew his firearm and gave verbal commands to put it down. Mr. B stepped back, then raised the gun again at Officer 1. Officer 1 fired 3 rounds. Mr. B was struck and fell to the ground. The weapon was later identified as a Broadex .44 Super Magnum BB gun. It had no orange safety tip or any visible signs that it was a replica. With Mr. B on the ground and the gun in close proximity, Officers 1 and 2 maintained cover with their firearms until the family was cleared. Both officers then holstered their weapons, rendered medical aid while awaiting fire and rescue. Mr. B has sustained a gunshot wound in his left thigh, lower left abdomen, and right forearm. No officers were injured. Mr. B was cooperative after that incident and was transported to the hospital. He was subsequently charged with 1 count of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. IAFD reviewed all 3 uses of force, level 3 firearm discharge. Both level 1 shows of force were found to be objectively reasonable, minimal, and necessary and within APD policy. No policy violations, training deficiencies, or misconduct were identified. And that concludes case 25-0054704. Deputy Director Abbasi.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Member Budonaro, members of the board. This incident involved an officer-involved shooting that occurred during a response to a reported domestic dispute between brothers at a residence. Upon arrival, officers announced their presence. An individual immediately exited the residence, holding what appeared to be a firearm, and pointed it directly toward an officer. The situation escalated rapidly, limiting any opportunity for any de-escalation in this case. The officer attempted to move to a position of cover behind a pillar and issued repeated verbal commands for the individual to drop the firearm. The individual did not comply and continued to point the firearm in the direction of the officer. After several seconds of continued commands and non-compliance, the officer discharged his firearm, striking and injuring the individual. The officer maintained verbal engagement and provided commands for approximately 7 seconds, despite the immediate threat that was posed to him. While not required under policy or training, in the presence of a immediate deadly threat, the officer's actions reflected an effort to seek compliance prior to the use of deadly force in this case. During the force review board review, an operational issue was identified related to the information sharing with the dispatched officers. As Member Budonaro stated, the officer already left the vehicle before they could get the information regarding the subject history involving battery on a peace officer and whatnot. However, because they already left the vehicle, the information was not communicated to them in real time. As a result of this case, a referral was generated during the FRB to ensure that critical safety-related information is communicated over the radio when officer safety may be impacted. This led to a recent policy change in communication protocols involving the Real-Time Crime Center, and we had that discussion at one of our policy meetings when this change came through. Based on the preponderance of the evidence and the totality of the circumstance, the IAFD determined that the use of force was consistent with department policy and the officer's actions were reasonable, minimal, and necessary to address the immediate deadly threat that was posed by the subject in this incident. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Commander Norris, do you have anything?
No comments at this time.
Court, do you have questions? Let me turn this.
You know he does.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, since the policy's already been addressed, that was my only question, was about relaying the information and them getting any prior interaction with APD.
Yes, sir.
And that's been addressed, so I'll give it over to,
What's my last name?
whatever.
Commander, first, sad. It's very sad about this. And because, correct me if I'm wrong, was that this the firearm this individual was a replica BB gun or something like that that had the orange safety thing removed? Was that?
Yes.
Okay. No, I'm not even going down that. I'm going to do something else. So I'm doing a little bit of a lane change. Is there like a way APD could do like a social media or something like that to just remind the public not to remove those orange safety tips? Like, would that help?
I think that's an option. I know that in purchasing those BB guns and on the packages, it specifically tells you not to do that, right? But we all know they probably just rip open the package and throw in the CO2 cartridge and start firing away.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something that I think could possibly be helpful if we sent something through Instagram or through Facebook or something like that through
yeah.
a media release. But
Yeah,
absolutely.
I saw that and watched the video and all that, and then saw what it was, and I went, "Oh,
I will tell you this: even if it had the safety tip on it,
yeah,
he would have gotten shot.
yeah,
The key is don't point things at police officers so you don't get shot.
yeah."
And I think that we have made a pretty strong effort to inform people not to point guns at police officers, fake or real, because the outcome is going to be somebody getting shot.
Yeah, yeah, and I just saw that and I went, oh,
Yeah.
okay. So that's why I'm just bringing that one up is I don't know of a good way to, and I'm just
Yeah.
trying to get our hamsters working on our brains
Sure.
at night to just think of an idea. So
That or just the fact that if you have somebody with a behavioral health issue that his parents knew and allowing him to have access to things like that, I mean, I think we have a parenting problem here as well. So,
Any further questions from the board? For either Deputy Director or Commander Norris?
and real quick, I don't want to throw you guys off your agenda. I had forgot to mention when I was giving my update that the new use of force policy will be going live in about a week, April 18th. Just so you guys know.
Thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate that. Cool. Awesome. So with that being said, do the board members agree with the findings from the Internal Affairs Force Division investigation?
Yeah.
yes,
Perfect. I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the findings for APD's Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case number 25-0054-704. May I get a second, please?
seconded.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Butler, may I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon,
Affirm.
Vice Chair Budenaro,
Affirm.
Member Bullianitz,
Affirmed.
Member Richfield.
Affirm.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Butler, I appreciate that. Give us one quick second. Perfect. With that being said, we'll move on to the next order of business, which will be reports from CPOAB Subcommittee. The one we have right now is for Policy and Procedure Review Subcommittee, going to be presented by Vice Chair Budenaro. Sir?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, the Policy and Procedure Review Subcommittee met on April 2nd, and we took action on one notable item, the election of the chair, which was me by default. We discussed any policy recommendation that will be presented later in the agenda. One thing of note is that during the committee meeting, we discussed PSA's training at traffic accidents. That item will also be discussed later in the agenda. Our next policy procedure review subcommittee will be held May 7th, 2026, 3 p.m. at the CPOA office. And that concludes my report. Thank you, Ms. Barella.
Thank you, sir. I was like, why did you tell her thank you? But I forgot she wrote a whole thing for you. So the next order of business would be the discussion of possible actions for APD policy with Gabe Reamer, but he's not here yet. Do you want to continue without him?
Yes.
Okay. So it will be APD policy, and it'll be presented by Deputy Director Abbasi. We're going to talk first about recommendations for SOP 1-11 transit safety section. This floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. We had discussion when we met during the Policy and Procedure Review Subcommittee on April 2nd about these two recommendations that we have. SOP 1-11, the transit safety section, there appears to be a conflict with the other SOP, response to traffic crashes, where it says TSS personnel shall investigate traffic crashes involving city transit buses or city vans. The other SOP 246 states that Metro Traffic Division, MTD, shall investigate, or at least sworn personnel shall respond to the scene and ensure a proper investigation is completed when crash involve a city-owned vehicle. The board made that recommendation a few months ago, and the department accepted it. So they taken the investigation involving city-owned vehicle away from the PSAs and TSOs. So there appears to be this conflict with the transit safety section SOP when it comes to the crashes involving city buses and sun vans, as those are considered city-owned vehicles. However, when the policy was presented at the Policy and Procedure Review Board, we made a recommendation that though these individuals are considered to have expertise in conducting these crash investigation, we wanted them to specifically add a provision that states when there are no injuries involved. The department said it's already implied below in another section within the policy, which again, we still would like to see that provision added on the top of the section where it states, where it should state that investigate traffic crashes involving city transit buses or sun vans when there are no injuries. So that's the first recommendation. And to make it consistent with the other SOP 246 as well.
This is your baby, so.
No, it can't be implied. It's got to be specific, clear, concise. So that's the biggest concern and what the biggest concern was.
Awesome. So with that, the recommendation has been filed, yeah, correct? It has not been filed?
No.
Not yet, okay. So we'll take a vote on that one. I make a motion that we, let me ask this first. Are we okay with the recommendation moving forward? Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I make a motion that we forward this recommendation for SOP 1-11 that was presented to us from the subcommittee. May I get a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Boda, may I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon,
Approve.
Vice Chair Budenaro,
Approved.
Member Bullianitz,
Approved.
Member Richfield.
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Boda.
You're welcome.
Awesome. And then
Okay.
on to SP 2-7 damage to civilian property, correct?
Yes, so this one, our policy analyst, Mr. Reamer, he provided the policy owner before the policy came to the PPRB some recommendations that we were seeing some issues regarding officers losing property, civilian property. So there is no specific SOP that addresses that issue. So Mr. Reamer, he made some recommendations to the policy owner and they accepted all those recommendations that were made by the CPOA, considering the issue of basically adding a new section within the SOP that specifically focus on when what officers are supposed to do when they lose somebody's property. So all those all those recommendations were accepted by APD, and they've added those. We at the subcommittee on April 2nd, we had a discussion about coming up with the new title for the SOP. Right now it says damage to civilian property. So since we added new provisions about losing civilian property, so Member Budenaro asked us to come up with some few names as a recommendation, and the packet that you have, it lists some of the ideas that you can consider to be the title that we can recommend from our end to APD to consider.
Thank you. And these recommendations, they would be formally submitted to them, or is it informal?
Chair, all the recommendations that we submitted have already been accepted and they're already in the policy now.
What about the title? The title portion? So if we change the title, would that be formal or informal?
We can make a formal recommendation. You all can select which one do you believe is the most appropriate among the five that we gave you in the packet, and then we can submit it on behalf of the board.
Okay, thank you. That just determines if I have to take a vote or not a vote. That's fine, so thank you. Mr. Bulanado, or Vice Chair Bulanado, do you have anything to add to this?
No, I just believe that Member Bolians had, I'm trying to remember the wording that you had come up with, lost and/or, what was it?
Yeah, it was loss or damage, or it was like
Loss or damage.
like and or, right? So it was mostly around the verbiage of instead of like loss or, and it's like, no, but you could be lost and or
Yeah.
right? So it's semantics, but it's more of, we want to make sure it can be lost and damaged at the same time, or it could just be lost or damaged. Does that, if that kind of makes sense from a verbiage perspective?
So they provided both options, right? So they provided damage to and or loss of
Yes.
civilian property, and then they provided loss and or damage
Yeah,
to civilian property.
it's more of which one did we want to go first? I was of the secondary,
The loss and or damage,
yes.
you think? Sir? What do you think? Which one? We have to choose which one we want to recommend for them to submit on their behalf. So you got to be damage to and or loss of civilian property, or loss and or damage of civilian property. So we have to choose which one to recommend, or we can submit both and let them choose.
I like that. To me, it just
Loss
sounds better to
and/or
the
damage.
ear of the
It's this
second one.
SOP.
No,
Yeah,
But I'm just
loss
crazy.
and/or damaged.
yes,
Which one do you think?
loss and or damage.
Yeah,
Second?
that's,
Second.
yeah.
Okay. So we all agree on the loss and or damage of civilian property. So with that being said, I make a motion that we direct the CPOA to submit the title recommendation for this SOP, or SOP 2-7, to change it from damage to civilian property to loss and or damage of civilian property. May I get a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Budanaro. Ms. Barrera, may I roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon,
Approve.
Vice Chair Budenaro,
Approved.
Member Bulianitz,
Approve.
Member Richfield.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barrera. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Do you want me to do this, the recommendations portion? I can spitfire it, or do you want to do it? Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Chair, if I may,
Deputy Director, go ahead.
when you look at the policy, it talks about damage first. The first section talks about damage, and then the new section talks about loss. So the reason we recommended damage and lost or loss to civilian is so it flows in the same order, but it doesn't really matter. We can just give them a recommendation and they can accept whichever works best for them.
Why don't we just give them the choice of both of them?
What do y'all think? Choice of both, or would you just leave it as loss or damage? I mean, damage of civilian property is still in there. Or for flow. Thoughts? I know you have thoughts. Say something.
I would never have opinions. I don't know what you're talking about. No, I mean, I think at that point, like, I don't think it matters that much for them just to have it just like, okay, we're going to talk about damage anyways, and they can reorganize it. But I don't think it really matters.
Opinion?
Yeah, I don't think so either, but it's probably good to just, for flow's sake, send them both.
So just to be clear, you voted for the last
Yeah, we
option,
already
and
voted.
that's what you want.
Well,
Okay,
that's, yeah,
that's
okay.
fine.
Well, we'll leave it as such for now.
Yeah, we'll leave it.
If they come back at us, we'll back up.
And there is actually another recommendation that we had a discussion on during the policy subcommittee meeting. In the policy section on the top under procedure, it talks about civilian property may include but is not limited to, and then it lists backpacks, cell phones, purses, wallets, vehicles. One of the things that we had a discussion about was to add keys in there, and the board said they agree with it and will take it to the full board. So if you would also like to add that as a recommendation, we can also put it through, to add keys in that list.
Yeah. So that was kind of my thing, right? Because like, I'm thinking of what I do to pat down every time I leave the house. It's, do I have my wallet, phone, whatever, and it's keys. I know it's already included into that, but I think just another reminder of a small object that can be lost, keys, is something that we just reminding. So I don't see a harm in adding keys to that section, but it's just one of those extra, like, even if it's a single key, it's small enough that somebody would forget about it.
Not to mention the cost of a key fob for a vehicle.
Yeah.
Is,
Oh, yeah, and the key fobs, whatever, like, that's a lot of money.
they're very expensive.
Or building, if it's a building key.
Yeah. Oh, and then having to re-keys anything? Like,
Yeah, that's the reason why.
Yeah, because I would assume if that's the case, this, like, APD would be liable to replace all those locks or replace the keys and get it programmed, like, BMW key or anything like that is at least $500. And then reprogramming it is another couple $100. So like, that's almost like $1,000 right there. So, talk about a key or a grand.
Or key fob. And or key fob, yeah.
Okay, so what the recommendation is that we make a recommendation that keys be added to the list that's listed in the SOP, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Do we all agree on it? Yeah. Okay, so I make a motion that we direct the CPOA to make a recommendation to add keys onto SOP 2-7 on our behalf. May I get a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Perla, may I get a roll call vote for that recommendation, please?
Chair Calderon,
Approved.
Vice Chair Budenaro,
Approved.
Member Bolyanitz,
Approved.
Member Richfield.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Perla. I appreciate that. Okay, sir, go ahead and do your no recommendations portion.
Thank you, Chair. There were no recommendations for SOP 1-52 Homeland Security Unit, SOP 1-67 Multi-Agency Task Force, or MTAF, SOP 1-98 Electronic Support Unit, or ESU, SOP 2-19 Response to Behavioral Health Issues, SOP 2-31 Emergency Medical and Trauma Services, SOP 2-41 Traffic Stops, SOP 2-46 Response to Traffic Crashes, SOP 2-74 Submission of Felony Cases to the District Attorney, and SOP 3-12 Awards and Recognition, and SOP 3-43 Release of Duty all had no recommendations.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Awesome. So with that, we move on to the next section, which is APD response to policy recommendations. This is a standing item. There is none to report for this board meeting. Perfect. Thank you. Before we move on real quick, Mr. Reamer, sorry. You don't have to come up. I run a tight ship. I'm really quick.
Yeah, unlike some.
We're gonna mess up your scheduling of showing up a little later. Sorry. And granted, we had no appeals today either, so it kind of facilitated a lot quicker of a meeting. But thank you for coming, though. Appreciate you. So moving on to the next agenda item will be the request for police service aid PSA training presentation regarding traffic accidents presented by Vice Chair Budunaro.
With consideration of some of the expansion of the PSA's responsibilities, I think it would be germane and quite enlightening to be able to see what training on traffic accidents they're receiving exactly. So I would really like to request a presentation regarding the PSA training as they handle accidents, moving, reporting, the whole 9 yards.
Perfect. Any board members object to that? You okay with that? Perfect. Secretary Director.
Yes, so first question is, do you want to add, if there's any difference, the transit safety officers? Okay.
Absolutely.
And the second question is, about when are you wanting to do this? You have the forensics one that's coming up here at the end of the month.
And we have records as well.
I'm sorry?
We have records after that, correct?
Well, we're just kind of doing them at a time. So right now we've got forensics scheduled. You have, as a board, requested records. I don't remember the third one right now. There was a third one, but SWAT or a K-9 or something, I forget. It wasn't SWAT, but something with K-9, I think. So it just depends on how soon or later you would like this, if you want to change your order around.
Yeah, if we can do it May, June, that'd be great. I think it would, with things that are coming up, and their responsibilities increasing, I think the sooner the better. So after this, if we can get it in May, that would be perfect.
So the next one, so we've got
Yeah.
the next
forensics
one,
and
yeah.
then
Yeah, the
one
next
that's
one, we'll
for the next
We'll bump the
push
next
the
one.
other ones down.
Yeah, we're okay with that. Any other questions? Clarifying questions? Good, good, cool, good, good. Fabulous. Perfect. With that being said, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which would be the 2026 OMA resolution. This will be presented by our legal counsel, Mr. Kidd. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What you have before you is the board's annual resolution regarding the Open Meetings Act. The state statute does require that boards and commissions, subject to the act, do pass an annual resolution that articulates the notice provisions and all of the other requirements therein. What you have here is essentially a mirror of the resolution that was passed last year with just some minor changes made to dates and so forth. So unless there are any questions, I would recommend that the board pass this.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Any board members have any questions for myself, for council? Perfect. Are we in agreement with the
Yes.
OMA resolution? Perfect. So with that being said, I make a motion that we approve the 2026 OMA resolution as written. May I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Barela, I get a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Move for adoption. Chair Calderon?
Yes, my apologies, yes. So I make a motion that we adopt the 2026 OMA resolutions as written. Now may I get a second?
You may. I second that motion.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Barela, may I get a roll call vote?
Chair
on the
Calderon?
adoption? Affirm.
Vice Chair Budenaro?
Affirmed.
Member Bolianis?
Affirmed.
Member Richfield?
Affirm.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barela, I appreciate that. Why is my pen not working? Perfect. Any other questions on this before we move on? Perfect. With that being said, we'll move on to the next order of business, which would be other business. Does anybody have any business to present to the board? No? Nothing to bring? Nothing to bring? Good, good, good. Cool. With that being said, we'll move on to the next order of business, which would be adjournment. The next regularly scheduled board meeting will be held on Tuesday, May 12th of 2026. A posting will be made. With that being said, I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting. May I get a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Barela, may I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon?
Approved.
Vice Chair Budenaro?
Approved.
Member Bolianis?
Approved.
Member Richfield?
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barela. I appreciate that. Everybody have a great night. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.